in a serene hillside in Galilee, with a diverse crowd gathered around a man who radiates wisdom and peace. His words are simple, yet they cut to the core of human existence. He speaks of blessings for the poor in spirit, the meek, and the merciful. Ideas so radically different from the prevailing thoughts of the time that they left everyone stunned. This is no ordinary speech. This is the Sermon on the Mount, and it's about to turn the world upside down. In this video, we'll dive into the shocking lessons from this sermon like never before, unraveling the divine truths that have inspired billions for over 2,000 years. Whether you're familiar with these teachings or hearing them for the first time, you're in for revelations that will challenge your perspective on life, faith, and human relationships. So, let's get started. Number 1. The Beatitudes. Blessed are the underdogs. The Beatitudes open the Sermon on the Mount with a breathtakingly radical shift in perspective, speaking directly to those society often overlooks. In a culture where power, wealth, and status were seen as marks of divine favor, Jesus offers a message that shocks his audience to their core. These are not just comforting words to soothe the soul, but revolutionary proclamations that challenge the established norms and values of society. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:3. With this single sentence, Jesus turns conventional wisdom upside down. Imagine hearing this in a world where being rich, powerful, or influential was thought to be a sign of God's approval. Jesus is saying that the spiritually broken, the ones who are aware of their own limitations and inadequacies, are actually the ones closest to God's heart. It's not just a focus on material poverty, though that may play a role. It's more about recognizing our deep spiritual need and dependence on God. Only when we come to terms with this reality can we be truly open to receiving His grace and mercy. But the Beatitudes don't stop there. Jesus goes on to bless those who mourn, the meek, and those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Each statement further flips societal expectations. The meek, not the powerful, will inherit the earth. Those who grieve are not forgotten but are destined for comfort. Jesus elevates those who are marginalized and forgotten, the people who seem to have the least in this world. This is not just a hopeful message. It's a staggering shift in worldview, one that calls us to rethink how we view success, power, and favor. Even in today's society, where power and prestige are still highly valued, this teaching challenges us to reconsider what it means to truly live a life blessed by God. Number 2. Turn the other cheek. The call for radical nonviolence. One of the most shocking and difficult teachings from the Sermon on the Mount is undoubtedly Jesus' command to turn the other cheek. Matthew 5:39. At first glance, this statement seems like an invitation to passivity, to simply endure mistreatment without standing up for oneself. For many, this instruction feels counterintuitive, especially in a world where self-defense and retaliation are often seen as justified responses to aggression. But as with much of Jesus' teaching, a deeper look reveals profound wisdom. This is not a call to weakness or submission, but rather a call to radical strength. Strength that comes from restraint, dignity, and moral conviction. Far from asking people to be doormats, Jesus is introducing a new form of resistance, one that confronts injustice without resorting to violence. In the context of ancient Jewish culture, a slap to the cheek wasn't merely a physical attack, but a calculated insult. To be slapped, especially with the back of the hand, was a demeaning gesture meant to humiliate and reduce the victim's status. In a society deeply concerned with honor and shame, retaliation was often expected to restore dignity. However, when Jesus commands his followers to turn the other cheek, he is challenging the very foundation of this honor-based system. By turning the other cheek, the victim refuses to sink to the level of the aggressor. They stand firm, maintaining their dignity, but without responding with violence. This is a powerful form of nonviolent resistance that leaves the oppressor disarmed, both morally and socially. This teaching echoes throughout history in movements for social justice. such as Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance and Martin Luther King Jr.'s civil rights activism. It continues to resonate powerfully in today's world, where conflicts so often escalate due to cycles of retaliation and vengeance. Jesus presents a way of responding to evil that breaks the cycle of violence entirely. Rather than meeting violence with more violence, which only perpetuates the problem, turning the other cheek offers a path to peace, albeit one that requires immense inner strength. It's a radical teaching that still challenges us today, calling us to rethink how we respond to conflict in our own lives, whether personal or global. Number 3. Love your enemies, the ultimate test of compassion. And just when you thought the teachings couldn't get any more challenging, Jesus drops this bombshell. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:44. Wait, what? Love the people who hurt us? This command seems absurd, even impossible by human standards. But that's precisely the point. Jesus is calling his followers to live out a love that transcends human understanding, a love that mirrors God's own love for humanity. Imagine the implications of this teaching. In a world where tribalism, revenge, and hatred are often the default responses to conflict, Jesus asks us to do the unthinkable: love our enemies. This doesn't mean passively allowing injustice to continue, but it does mean actively working for the good of those who oppose us, seeing their humanity despite their actions. It's a transformative way to live, and one that pushes us to the very edge of what we think is possible in terms of compassion and forgiveness. Number 4. The Lord's Prayer, a blueprint for life. Then comes the Lord's Prayer, a simple yet profound model for how to communicate with God. This prayer is not just a set of words to recite, it's a guide for how to live a life aligned with God's will. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Matthew 6:9-10. These opening lines alone are packed with meaning. We're invited to address God as our Father, signifying a close personal relationship with Him. Yet, we're also called to revere His name, acknowledging His holiness. The prayer continues with a focus on God's kingdom and will, calling us to align our lives with His purposes rather than our own selfish desires. And then, there's the plea for daily bread, a reminder of our dependence on God for every need, big or small. The Lord's Prayer encapsulates the essence of what it means to live a life of faith, trust, and obedience to God. It's not just about asking for things, but about seeking to live in harmony with God's plan for the world. Number 5. Judge not, a call for humility and grace. One of the most quoted parts of the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus' teaching on judgment. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. Matthew 7:1. This is not a call to ignore wrongdoing or avoid making moral discernments. Rather, it's a warning against hypocritical, self-righteous judgment. How often do we point out the flaws in others while ignoring our own? Jesus illustrates this point with the vivid metaphor of the speck and the plank. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Matthew 7:3. This is a humbling reminder that we are all flawed, and none of us is in a position to condemn others. Instead of rushing to judgment, Jesus invites us to approach one another with humility, grace, and a willingness to examine our own hearts first. In a world that's quick to criticize and slow to forgive, this teaching is as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Number 6. The Golden Rule, the heart of the gospel. Finally, the Sermon on the Mount culminates in one of the most famous ethical teachings in all of human history. Do to others what you would have them do to you. Matthew 7:12. This simple yet profound statement encapsulates the heart of Jesus' message. It's not just a guideline for moral behavior. It's a radical call to empathy, compassion, and active love. The Golden Rule challenges us to step outside of ourselves and consider the needs and feelings of others. It's a standard of conduct that, if followed, could transform personal relationships, communities, and even nations. Imagine a world where everyone lived by this principle, where instead of seeking their own advantage, people actively sought to care for and uplift those around them. It's a vision of the kingdom of God on earth, and it's what Jesus calls us to strive for. Conclusion: a call to live out the sermon's radical vision. The Sermon on the Mount is not just a set of nice ideals or lofty aspirations. It's a call to live in a radically different way, a way that defies the values of a self-centered world and embraces the kingdom of God. These teachings are challenging, no doubt. Loving your enemies, turning the other cheek, and living with humility require more than just good intentions. They demand a deep transformation of the heart, one that only comes through a relationship with God. But here's the good news: Jesus doesn't just tell us to do these things and then leave us to figure it out on our own. He empowers us through His Spirit to live in this new way, to embody the values of His kingdom right here, right now. So, as we reflect on these lessons, the question for all of us is simple. Are we willing to take up this challenge? Are we ready to live out these shocking, life-changing truths? Did any of these lessons from the Sermon on the Mount hit home for you? What part of this radical message challenges you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the wisdom of the Bible. Remember, living out these teachings isn't easy, but together, we can encourage one another to live out this transformative message in our everyday lives. So hit that subscribe button, and let's keep this conversation going.